Hey everyone, it's Blake here from ChessPathways.com, and today I have a game analysis video for you from one of our members. This game was sent to me by Geordie 1974, who was actually one of the winners of our recently concluded ChessPathways Tournament Challenge, where I encouraged our ChessPathways members to go either play a real-life chess tournament over the board, or to simulate a tournament online by playing at least 4 long-time control online games in quick succession to get the tournament experience right at home. So Geordie 1974 took me up on that, so congratulations, I'll be sending you your prize shortly, and it looked like you did pretty well. You went 4 out of 5 in the 5 games you played for this challenge, and of course I'm going to be looking at the game you lost, so I can give you some feedback. So you had black here, let's flip the board around and get to it. I took a brief look earlier at this, and it looks like it was a very instructive game. E4, E5, and your opponent plays the wayward queen attack with queen to H5. Yeah, this just requires a little bit of care from black. White might be trying to do the 4-move checkmate against you with bishop c4 and queen takes f7 checkmate, and of course the pawn is under attack, but it's nothing black needs to fear if black just takes it 1 move at a time and neutralizes the threats. So okay, d6 is fine. Now your opponent plays bishop b5 check, and you play knight c6. That's a reasonable move. You can also just play c6 and kick that bishop away. Usually the bishop will not come into enemy territory like this, when it can just be kicked away with a simple pawn move like c6. But okay, knight c6, bishop c4. Yeah, your opponent basically just gave you a free developing move there by moving the bishop again already. So he's threatening checkmate. You block with g6. That's good. Queen f3, threatening checkmate again. And you once again block with queen to e7. Yeah, all good so far. White's wasted a lot of time. I might have played knight f6 instead. You said you weren't really sure where to put your queen. I think you can just develop your knight, and then play bishop g7 next and castle, and black's going to be fine there. But queen e7 is good too. c3, bishop e6, I like it, just developing and trading off this bishop. Bishop takes e6, queen takes e6, knight h3, and here you play queen to f6. So this is a theme I really noticed throughout the game, and that's that you love to offer your opponent the opportunity to exchange with you. And I totally get it. I did too at this rating level. So I don't think this is the best move because you just want to keep going on with your development. Just play knight f6. Keep the development going. That's the most important thing in the opening of the game. We're going to see later on how this mindset of seeking exchanges came back to hurt you later. Now, exchanges can be a valuable tool, especially if you're up material and you want to simplify into a winning endgame. Here, though, you're not even up material. You just need to get your pieces into the game and not play a move like queen f6 just trying to exchange. So queen f6, okay, your opponent went along with it. The queen's come off the board, and white did go ahead and develop your knight for you, so that's nice. Now your opponent just blunders a pawn. You're attacking their e4 pawn. They should have played probably d3 to defend it, but instead they played knight to a3, and you were able to just take that pawn on e4. So far, so good. It seems like you have a good eye for tactics for someone of this rating level. You defended all the threats here against f7. You won this pawn as soon as white didn't defend it, so that's all great. Okay, so d3, you save your knight and counterattack the d3 pawn. White blunders that pawn too. b4, knight takes d3. King d2, you exchange off some pieces, that's fine. Bishop g7, I like it, developing. Knight to b5, rook c8, you defend that pawn. Rook c d1, castles. Yeah, so far you're playing just about perfectly. I have that slight criticism of queen f6, but no tactical mistakes whatsoever. This is great. Knight to g5, that doesn't threaten anything, and you just kick that knight away. Perfect. You kick the other knight away. Yeah, great. Knight e4, and now knight back to e7. So it looks like this idea with knight e7, you didn't give any comments on it here, but from your next couple moves, it looks like your idea was to play knight d5 and knight f6 and really embark on this 3-move journey just to offer an exchange. So you're up 2 pawns here. I think it's time to start making use of your extra pawns and your space advantage. Just get these pawns rolling. I would play f5. There's no reason at all to worry about exposing the king. We're practically in an endgame right now. And you have these 2 extra central pawns. You might as well get them rolling. Then you could even play e4 maybe later, open up this bishop to attack the c3 pawn. And black just has a completely winning position. Of course, nothing wrong with knight e7. I just think f5 is more direct. There's no reason to really maneuver anymore here instead of just, setting the pawns in motion. Okay, g4. Looks like your opponent wanted to stop f5. So now you just play knight d5. I like that move now because f4 is an outpost. White can never kick you away from there again because they played g4. h4. And now knight f6. Okay, yeah, I might have played knight f4 just because it's a nice outpost, but I think knight f6 is fine too. You're offering an exchange, and white kind of has trouble avoiding it because g4 is hanging. And yeah, the more pieces you get off the board, the closer you get to a winning endgame. You say you don't know how to capitalize on the exposed king. Yeah, that's not what this game's really about here. This is almost an endgame. There's not going to be an attack on the enemy king. The game's not about trying to get to the white king right now. The game's about trying to make use of your extra 2 pawns, simplify when you can, but also advance your own agenda. Set those pawns rolling, and you should be able to win the endgame. Okay, your opponent played f3, and now you played d5, and I'm not a huge fan of that move because I don't think there's a reason to give the enemy knight this c5 square. That seems a little annoying. It's going to attack your b-pawn, and if your b-pawn moves, then your a-pawn would be under attack. So it all comes down to really asking the one big question of, if I make this move, what's my opponent going to do? You probably found that knight c5 was kind of annoying after they played it, but you probably just didn't consider it before you made this move. And really, this knight was really well restricted here. It had no good squares to go to. I think you can actually just exchange it right now, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But I wouldn't give it the c5 square. But okay, d5, knight to c5. That attacks your b-pawn here. You just kept advancing with pawn to e4. This is still good for you. You're at least opening this bishop up and trying to break up the white pawns. I just think whenever you have such a clear advantage of 2 pawns, there's no reason to complicate things. I would have tried to keep things simple. White's going to have the chance to maybe get some material back. So g5, hd5, knight to h7. Yeah, but now white gets to play f4, and now your knight's really restricted here. And you said you were worried about the h-file. If you were worried about the h-file, couldn't we just play knight h5 right here? That seems to really shut off the h-file. There's nothing white can do to dislodge this knight. And this seems like a much better alternative for black. Anyway, in the game you chose knight h7, white played f4, and now you played f5. Okay, so I guess you're not too worried about white taking en passant. I'm not sure if you considered that, but I think that's okay for you. That would get your knight back into the game, and I guess you just wanted to connect your pawns a little bit more, although this allows knight e6 possibly. Black is still surely better here with the extra 2 pawns, but again, white's getting possibly some unnecessary counterplay here, either on the h-file or by taking the b7 pawn. So we'll take a look. Knight to c2, rook to f7. Okay, yeah, I like that move, trying to give f8 to the knight, I think is your idea. Knight e6, knight f8, knight takes g7, king takes g7, knight to d4, rook to e8. Yeah, looks like you're intending knight e6, which is a good move. This knight's much better than your knight here on f8, so why not make that exchange? Rook to e3, knight e6, rook e to h3. And yeah, all the threats here are really an illusion. Your king always has an escape. So you go ahead and just exchange off that knight. White throws in a check. King f8, rook h8, king e7, c takes d4, takes. Okay, so black is completely winning here. You're up 2 full pawns here and a rook in game, including a very strong protected passed pawn here on e4. Your rook's doing a good job of protecting everything. And again, I think you want to start setting your pawns in motion here. If I were you, I probably would have played king to d6, intending to possibly play b6 and c5, and set even more of those pawns in motion. This rook could come to e7 and go behind this passed pawn. If white attacks your g-pawn, you can just play rook g7, no problem there. And everything is totally safe here. Black can take their time to win this position, there's no rush. The only important thing is that you don't lose any material back. So let's look at the game. Here you played rook f8. It's a fine move, but I think it's just based on wishful thinking. You're just hoping that white's going to exchange rooks here and you get to win the king and pawn endgame. But of course, white has no reason to exchange rooks. White can play rook h6 or rook h7 check, and now you have to defend this pawn, and I think here you blunder. You play king to f7, and you've just missed a simple little skewer here. White can play rook h7 and start winning your queenside pawns, and now the game is going to be a lot more complicated. Instead, I think it wasn't too late to play rook g8 to defend that pawn, and then you could always meet rook h7 with king d6, and I think everything's under control here for black. So I guess one big takeaway is the single most important factor when you're trying to win a winning position is to not let your opponent back in the game. Always consider their possible opportunities. Before you make any move, ask yourself, what's my opponent going to do if I make this move? And just make sure you don't lose any material back. You can take your time, you don't have to play the most accurate moves, you just have to make sure you don't lose material back. So king f7, rook h7 check, king g8. Yeah, I don't think you want to put your king on the back rank. Why not play at least king to e6? Because after king g8, rook takes c7, now white's only down one pawn. Your b pawn here is under attack, your king is cut off on the back rank. Rook f7 is good. That at least saves your king from being cut off and defends the pawn. But now rook c5, and this pawn's under attack. Here you play rook to h7, trying to get some counterplay. And I think that's reasonable, trying to activate the rook like that. I might have considered playing rook to d7. Usually you don't want to have a passive rook in a rook in game, but this would just give your king time to come to e6, get the king involved in the game, and then maybe your rook could activate itself later. You always want to make use of that king in the endgame. You can't just have the king sit on the back rank. So rook to h7, and white could have taken this pawn. Instead, white gave this check on c8. Okay, king to g7. And again, I don't know if you want to come to g7. I probably would have came to f7, trying to get this king closer to the middle. I know white could give this check, and you have to go back. In fact, I think white actually has a draw if they won it. That might be another downside of rook h7. I don't see how black can escape these checks. After king f7 or king g7, white could just give check. You have to come defend your rook. Check. Doesn't matter which one you choose. Check. And white would have a draw. But instead, after king g7, your opponent simply played a4. And here, once again, this might be the move that illustrates it best. Instead of trying to come down here and maybe advance your own agenda, trying to attack the f-pawn, or trying to advance the e-pawn, or trying to centralize the king, you simply play rook h8, again, just because it offers an exchange, but you just missed a really simple, a fork here. Rook c7 just forking the pawn and the king. And I know you're good enough to see a tactic like that. You've seen plenty of tactics more complex than that throughout this game. It's just that I think whenever you see a move that threatens to exchange something, you just want to play it so badly that you just play it without looking at the consequences. So that would be a big thing to work on. Rook c7, king g8, rook takes b7. Now material's equal, and white has the more active rook. All of a sudden, white has a good position. Rook to h4. Okay, I like it, counterattacking this pawn. Rook to b6. Rook takes f4, rook takes g6, king h7. Okay, I might have played king f7, but okay, I think that might be okay. Rook takes a6. Okay, so white has connected past pawns now, but so do you. You can start trying to get these pawns rolling as well. And you play rook to g4. Yeah, I think the unfortunate thing is that white's past pawns are so far away from your king, whereas white's king can help keep your pawns under control. That's the importance of centralizing your king in an endgame. So g6, and you play rook takes g6. Yeah, you can't go to the king and pawn endgame. Did you calculate this out before making the exchange? Because white's just going to keep your pawns under control, and this a-pawn is just becoming a queen, basically. I think you should have just played king g7. This g-pawn's not a concern at all. It's all going to come down to your connected passed pawns versus white's connected passed pawns. You don't have to win the g-pawn. The g-pawn's not a threat. But anyway, you played rook takes g6, and now you just go to the king and pawn endgame. And yeah, after b5, you're unfortunately forced to resign. So thanks for sharing that game with us. I thought it was very instructive, and I hope everyone watching this video learned something from it. If you want to make sure that you don't miss out on our future challenges, make sure you visit ChessPathways.com and get signed up. It's completely free, only takes 5 seconds, and I will send you a free move-by-move guide to chess thinking when you join. Thanks, and I'll see you there.